Welcome back to another episode of Consciously Clueless. I'm your host, Carly, and I'll be your guide on this journey from consciousness to cluelessness and back around again. Today on the podcast, I talk to Honey LaBronx. Honey LaBronx stars in her own YouTube cooking series, The Vegan Drag Queen, and hosts the Big Fat Vegan Radio podcast. An LGBT rights activist, she is committed to bringing discussions about animal rights, intersectionality, and social justice to new audiences. In 2011, she was one of 8 activists arrested for blocking New York City traffic while demonstrating for marriage equality alongside her drag mother, Bob the Drag Queen. She has performed around the world raising funds for local animal sanctuaries, rescues, and activist organizations. Out of drag, Honey, Ben Strothmann, is an actor, singer, playwright, and theatrical photographer originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. This conversation was so good. We literally get into everything. So much so that this is only part 1. We will be continuing the conversation and releasing part 2 next week. Here we go. Sure. So usually, first of all, thank you for joining me.
Oh my God, yeah.
And making time. But second of all, I really like starting. So the podcast is called Consciously Clueless.
Yeah.
And I did that with the space of being like, I'm learning so much. And there's those days where you wake up and you're like, well, I'm conscious. I'm with it. I get it. I'm centered. And then there's those days you wake up and you're like, I'm clueless. I have no idea what's going on. What is the world? And everything in between. Like, that's what I want to cover. It's like, that's life. That's all of it. So I like asking people, like, where are you at in this moment on that spectrum of conscious to cluelessness?
Oh, God, I don't know why that feels like a pop quiz to me, but I'm like, I have so
It's
much
not a
to say
trick.
about
It's
that.
not a
I have
trap.
so much to say about that.
No, say it all.
Do you need to officially like, okay, and we're starting in 1, 2, 3, or are you just starting from whenever? Okay.
Just go.
Well, if we're gonna just go, I'll start by saying that the reason I'm late is, and I have ADHD, and if you know anything about me, you know that aside from being vegan and a drag queen, I have ADHD, and I love spreadsheets, and I'm very do-it-yourselfer, and yes, maybe that kind of comes a bit from my own toxic masculinity, like I'm gonna show how macho I am, but I have like a full woodworking studio in my small Manhattan apartment, and I recently got into like, you know what? If it's the 5th time I have to cut through steel bars myself with a tiny hacksaw, I'm going to get a Dremel and just start doing it. So I like making my own soy milk. When you make soy milk and you are simmering it, the thick skin forms at the top. That's called yuba. And when I was once making, this is all the explanation of why I'm late, by the way. So these are I don't tell short stories. I wish I could.
Me neither. I always apologize. Like when I'm like, long story short, then I'm like, just kidding.
Short story long. I think I got that backwards. Sorry. Well, I once followed Miyoko's unturkey recipe, which if anyone's never done it, I so recommend it. If for nothing else, the blend of spices and the resulting gravy that you end up making. I don't drink. I'm a person in recovery, 12 years sober. Yay me.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I now do use wine in my cooking sparingly and only when it's indicated. And I'm not saying that's okay for everyone in recovery.
Right.
You do you. If you're in your first 5 years, just don't even think about it, and then whatever. But so you do want to add the white wine in her gravy because it does make it's like adding the MSG. It gives it that, oh my God, what am I eating thing. So anyway, I've been making my own soy milk, and I could give a whole hour long.
I know, I'm fascinated by the fact that you make your own soy milk. I thought I was doing good with oat milk.
I could you make your own oat milk?
Yeah.
Oh, I am so sorry. Do you need something? Do you need a vacation? You need to sit down for a minute. Making oat milk is its own whole other thing. Do you strain it through something?
Yeah.
What?
Just like a cheesecloth like bag.
Oh God. The first time I made it, they said, here's the thing about oat, and I don't know who they are, but I didn't even meet them. But they said the thing about oat milk is it's so hard to strain it because it's too fine. It will pass through cheesecloth or a nut milk bag. So they said you really have to get a clean, like wet, rinsed white t-shirt. It's the only thing that's like such a thin mesh that even oat particles won't pass through it.
Yeah, oat milk gets a little chunky.
Oh, yeah. So when you strain it through the t-shirt material, you better clear your schedule. Like how long do you have? 4 hours? Because like it's not passing through on its own. And if you squeeze and apply pressure, that's great, but you're also forcing oat particles out. And when you are done, no matter how much you rinse that shirt and you dry it, you're done with that shirt. Because if you feel that part of the shirt, it feels like the shirt is wax coated. Like it's still cloth, it's still pliable, but it feels like it's a wax coated cotton, which is actually really expensive wax coated cotton. So maybe we're onto something. But soy milk,
Mm.
when you make soy milk, the yuba skin forms at the top. And I could go into a whole other thing about how I distill my own water. And so I use distilled water, but I also use filtered water before I distill it, and blah, 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 the difference that makes. But
Okay. Okay.
I got in straining the yuba, there's a skin that forms around the top, and you go in with like chopsticks or something to like break it up, and
Oh,
then
okay.
you imagine you're trying to get under a flat two-dimensional large circle with two chopsticks to lift it out. It is not going to stay flat. It's not going to hold its shape. And I
I
kept
imagine
thinking and
like
thinking.
the SCOBY of kombucha. Like,
Scoby. No, I've heard that. I don't know what that looks like.
okay, never mind. Well,
I can Google it.
yes,
I can
because
Google it
that's
while
what
you're
I'm
talking.
imagining you trying to lift out with chopsticks, and in my head that doesn't make any sense, but maybe I'm off.
Oh, Scoby. So it's probably something that forms at the top.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
it's the um symbiotic cultures and bacteria and yeast, I think is what it stands for.
I'm sure I'm spelling Scoby wrong, but they'll show.
SCOBY.
I was close. I had just an I at the end. Well, at any rate, oh, I see it now. Oh, wow. Oh God, that looks like a placenta. And I've not
Yes,
seen
yes, it
many.
does. It does.
So I created this in my mind. I was just, and if you want to take like a screenshot of this, or you want me to send you a
Absolutely.
picture of it so that people can see it in the show notes or whatever. Basically, this
Yes.
is just a wire mesh cooling rack. Like it has like the little fold out legs on the bottom. Well,
Wow.
I went through this whole thing because when you go to like Chinatown and you buy a yuba, they're usually at least this big. This is probably about 13 inches around
Okay.
circumference. No, diameter 13 inches. And when you buy them, they are folded in half and then in half again.
Okay.
So you get them wet and then you're able to unfold them. Because they're
Okay.
folded in half and in half again, it makes them a lot easier to store because it's not a huge circle, it's a
Right.
small folded thing. So I basically took this rack, I cut it, which cutting through steel is difficult. I got these teeny tiny key rings and held the whole thing together so it's hinged. So now I can put this at the bottom of my pot and just with strings on all four sides, just lift it out. So the yuba skin just seamlessly lifts out without interrupting its shape, and then fold it that way, and then fold it that way. I'm brilliant. I win the internet. I win DIY. I love the expression on your face. I appreciate that you're not like, So anyway,
No,
um,
I'm just thinking this is how you monetize your podcast. I mean, this is brilliant.
well, I also was thinking when I finished this, I'm like, could I make? And I'm like, here's why I will never make another one. The reason I'm late is so I'm cutting through steel.
Hmm.
Imagine then sitting down on your couch, which is just a few feet away. There's sparks flying everywhere while you're doing this. Here's the thing: in the moment, there's sparks, yeah, because it's still that hot. You know, it gets hot from the friction. When they cool and they land, that's just shrapnel. I've learned a couple of things. When you're cutting through metal, when you're cutting through steel, especially, wear a hat.
Mm-hmm,
I
hmm
have shrapnel in my scalp. I got most of it out. Thank you, tweezers. The sparks were kind of flying against my arm the whole time, but for some reason that was fine. While there's still sparks, I'm like, they're not. But also, I had to, every time I sat down on my couch, and you would think this would be big enough you'd see, the shrapnel from this can be so small that you can't see it unless the light catches it. They're almost like tiny hairs.
So what I'm hearing is that you also have shrapnel in your ass.
I didn't want to say it, but I mean, listen, the price of steel, what it is, I'm just saying my ass is that much more expensive. But
Hmm.
like there's moments where you're like, oh, you don't feel it until you move a certain way, and then your clothing rubs a certain way, and you're like, oh, there's something in there. And but so before sitting back down on the couch, I had to grab my furniture vac, my my vacuum with the furniture attachment and had to like vacuum all the upholstery before I could sit down. Because last time I'm like, oh, I'll just sit down on a towel. No, shrapnel will go through it anyway. But I'm here.
I relate 1,000%. I bought a short bus and I'm remodeling it to be like a tiny home on wheels.
Oh my God, that's my dream. That's my dream. That's my dream. Oh my
Yes.
God.
Yes. And I had to cut out every bus seat because of the angle and everything. So, which felt really badass because I'm like in there and like, I'm like real life Rosie the Riveter, there's like
Yes. Yes.
sparks flying and
Yes.
everything. But then I totally like afterwards would be like, what
Yeah.
did ow. Like,
Yeah.
and like hours later
Yeah.
where you're
Yeah.
just like, oh, there's stuff in my skin.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm realizing now, I'm like, I should wear, there was a moment where I realized while doing this, I'm like, I'm not wearing protective goggles. Those are just my glasses. I'm like, put the goggles
Oh,
on,
yep.
put a hat on. I kept forgetting to put a hat on. I even stopped to get video of it for the Instagram because I'm like, there's sparks flying everywhere.
It
This
looks
is
cool.
badass.
Absolutely.
There's like a boy or two I'm talking to online, and every time they see this, they're like, oh my God, you're so macho. You keep getting
And
sexier.
you're
And I'm
like,
like, okay,
who, me?
I'm gonna play up. I'm like, I don't want to call myself Rosie the Riveter because I'm taking away the sexy points. But in those moments, it's like, yeah, I should probably wear like my new faux leather jacket to protect anyway. But I love the short bus. Where do you live?
So I'm actually weirdly in Kansas right now because I'm visiting my best friend from grad school, but I
Is
live
there
in
any other way
Minnesota.
to be in Kansas?
No,
I'm kidding. I know I've never been, but I am assuming it holds up. You're from
no.
Minnesota.
Yes, and you're from Wisconsin?
Yeah, I was gonna ask where you're from when you said BAG earlier.
Mm-hmm. I am from Grand Marais, Minnesota, so like way up north.
Okay. I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which you know because I say Milwaukee, not
Yes, I do
Milwaukee.
know. I'm like 45 minutes from the Canadian border, so that's
Oh
how
my God.
far up right on
Yeah.
Lake Superior.
The further up you get, the more that accent is just. It's funny because coming from the Midwest and moving to the East Coast, people would like growing up in Wisconsin and hearing a Canadian accent, I would laugh at it like, oh my God, they seriously talk like that. Then you move to the East Coast and people are like, oh, are you from Canada? I'm like, no, I'm from Wisconsin. I was talking to my mom the other day and just hearing her say the word WATER, that is one of the words where you're like, I will find out where someone's from. I'm a Pisces. I'm a Pisces with
Same.
a really. Do you know your
Yes.
rising and your other thing?
Sagittarius and Libra.
Okay. And do you know if those are fire or air or earth, wind, and fire? That's
Oh.
okay.
Are we gonna start singing September?
Well, I'm a Pisces with a Pisces other thing and a Cancer moon. I'm guessing that's a Pisces with a Pisces rising and a Cancer moon. So but I actually found out that I'm not a Pisces, a double Pisces like I thought. I'm a Pisces Aquarius rising, and Aquarius is technically not water. It's an air sign, so I'm a double
Yep.
water with an air. So I'm very so I'm very transformative, and water takes the shape of its surroundings. So the first time I went to England, I was like afraid to talk because I could not help a weird phony English accent would come out of my mouth and I couldn't help it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I remember like I went to
You
a
and I'm
McDonald's
so
once.
glad you're saying this.
Why? Did you have the same experience?
Well, I just like also like I feel like a parrot or something sometimes. Like I want to when I hear something, I want to see if I can do it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
keep going.
except for like an Australian accent or a Texas accent, there's certain accents I just know I cannot do. I was a character actor in a play about 12 years ago, and I had to play an old Jewish man, not necessarily old, but I had to do a like legit Yiddish accent, and I had someone who grew up in that, like in like Crown Heights, Brooklyn, and she's like, "Oh my God, I grew up with this accent. And she taught me the entire accent,
Oh my God, this
and
is
I also
amazing.
learned it from like an accent coach tape." And people were like, and I'm that actor that when I'm in something, I'll go off stage for a moment, come back on as this character that I only do for that scene, then go off and become, ensemble or whoever.
Right.
And people don't recognize, like my own friends come to see the show and they don't recognize that I was also that other person. Like,
Oh
oh, I thought that was
wow.
just some Shakespearean actor or some Yiddish man, whatever. And that was actually before I became a drag queen, but it's kind of what I love about drag is I have the ability to put on makeup or put on a costume, and I can like just become a different person. Like I am cisgender, I'm not trans, but when I am in drag, I am a woman. Like I just am. Unless
Yes.
there's like a hot guy in the audience, and then I'm very immediately reminded, like, oh, I'm a guy. I'm a guy. But like I was doing a high school play, a high school musical. I don't want to say a high school musical because now it sounds like we were doing a high school musical.
Yep,
But
absolutely does.
we were doing West Side Story, and I was doing the Dream Ballet. And I really did not care for my partner. I adore her. At the time, I did not care for her for some reasons. I was just like, meh. But in my mind, when we're on stage, I'm like it or not, when we're on stage, I am in love with you.
I love
Like
you
I
so much.
this is this is the most important relationship in my life.
Yep,
When
absolutely.
I'm on stage, when I'm off stage, that's a different story.
Bye.
No, but why was I saying that? Oh yeah, so the accent thing. I'm getting better about finding my way back from like the skinnier and skinnier branches on my tangents, and that means the Wellbutrin's working. Which according to
Yay.
some vegan out there means I'm not vegan. So but
Mm-hmm.
the water thing, so I take on my accent. I can't help it. It starts to shift to where I am. So I now actually, and I'm gonna say it weird because I'm thinking about how I'm saying it, but if I say water, I'm usually just gonna say water. Now, that to me sounds normal now, water.
Right.
Sometimes in New York, people will say water, like there's an R in it. I don't know why. And it just happens. And I have said it unironically, just not meaning to say it. It's like the first time my mom heard me say water, and she's like, what did you say? And I'm like, water. And she's like, God, that sounds so gross. Like, I'm like, well, how are you supposed to say it? She's like, it's water.
Oh my gosh. Oh my
I'm like,
gosh. It's so real.
it's so strident, isn't it? It just sounds
Yes.
like someone's just taken witch hazel to my ears. Like, okay, it's water.
Yes. So my mom grew up in Georgia and Florida. And
Yeah.
so only when she's like really tired does a southern accent come out, but you can't tell. But when her and I went to Georgia the first time to visit one of her siblings, I was probably 8 and it was the first time I'd been down there. And Georgia, like that's a different southern than Florida, right? Like that's a different thing in terms of
Oh,
accent kind of
I mean,
thing and
oh, in
like
terms of accent, sure.
yep.
In terms of South, yeah. Like you
And
can,
also
there's parts of Florida that you can consider the South. Yeah.
yes. So then we went down there and I don't really remember this because I was pretty young, but I've been told that we called my dad one of the first nights we were there and I was like, "Hey daddy," and had this southern accent and my dad was like, "What's happening?" And my mom was like, I don't know, like she's just that's how she's talking now. Like she's been here for a day and a half. And I never connected it to like Pisces and that like watery
It's being a water
thing.
sign. Yeah. Water,
That's
like if you
so
put water in a
interesting.
fish bowl, it is now the shape of the fish bowl. The fish bowl. It takes on the shape of whatever it's. So, like, do you notice that you're very affected by your environment?
Understatement.
This is therapy now. Well, I
Yeah,
also, as someone
seriously.
with ADHD, I'm also affected by my environment. And I've been doing a huge decluttering and remodeling and putting up shelves everywhere.
DIY.
Oh my, so much. I don't own stock in the Container Store because I don't do stocks anymore. It's all about crypto, but that's a different podcast. But as my apartment gets, like if I'm ever staying in like a hotel or in someone else's home and
Mhm.
I wake up in the morning uh, and it's just a clean, tidy room, there's nowhere that my eye is drawn to. Oh, that's right, I have to make a decision about that thing. Oh, I can't forget that needs to. Oh my, did
Yes.
I not send that? I used to have a roommate who, whether he meant it this way or not, he was like, things talk to me. He's like, the stairs are talking to me and they are yelling at me that they need to be scrubbed and vacuumed. And I'm like,
Mm.
okay, but I can kind of get what he means now, in that everything, like I think it was like 80% of the information we take in is through our eyes, and everything, this is again, everything I'm going to say is a whole different podcast, but our entire experience of being alive only exists in language. Your experience of
Yes.
yourself is a linguistic phenomenon. Helen Keller, for example, and by the way, speaking of intersectionality, I love Helen Keller. I feel like I love her enough that if I make a Helen Keller joke, it's because I'm like, I can't think of anyone I have more reverence for. The fact that this woman could never, well, I mean, has no memory of the time she was young enough when she still could see, but a woman who cannot see or hear, who grew up to be one of the greatest philosophers and writers, and who
Mm-hmm.
once said, if languages are the instruments of like the orchestra of humanity, Greek is the violin. And I'm
Ooh.
like, how can Helen Keller know that? Like, how can she know? Can you imagine like
Ooh.
sensing that with your brain without having ever used your ears? But anyway, 80% of the information that comes in is visual, but everything we experience is word based, language based. If you've ever heard of or done The Artist's Way, Julia Cameron also talks about art is a language based, a word based, no, she says the opposite. It's a wordless language. It's an image based language,
Right.
even if our
Right.
art is chasing those images with words. um
Mm-hmm. Ooh,
so art is image
chasing.
based.
I
What's that
love
now?
that. Like
Chasing them with,
chasing.
yeah. I can't take credit. She says that herself, but but that's a different idea. That's the idea of art. I'm talking about our experience of life exists only in language. But here's the thing. Helen Keller, before, and by the way, if we've seen the 1950s Patty Duke version of The Miracle Worker, this is not a video podcast, so you can already see that I'm frustrated because I'm touching both my eyebrows. But Helen Keller, do you remember that? Have you seen the movie or at least seen the scene with the
It's been a
water?
while, but
And she starts
yes.
pumping the water in her hands, and suddenly she gets it and drops the pitcher, drops the
Yep.
pitcher, and then she like starts signing, and she says,
Yep, 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 yep.
no, bitch, you've never heard the word water. You've never heard anything. You don't know how to sound out word. No. But I like how in 1950s we're dumb enough that like the audience won't get it. You have to spell it out for them. And
Oh
it's
my God.
literally, I have to spell it out for them in a movie that is about someone having to spell things out for so, oh my God, that is meta. But anyway,
Ooh.
but not Patty Duke. I'm sure she has her own story. Helen Keller she has said that before she got language, before language like descended onto her, she did not like every life was just a whirling mass of sensations that were not
Ooh.
connected in any way. They didn't mean anything. There was just feelings and smells and flavors. That was it. The whole world is feelings, smells, and flavors. And like, this hurts, that feels good, this is warm, but not even language to like, this is warm, this is cold, just
To
like
discern or to, yeah.
she said before, when she thinks back on that time of her life, there was no experience of herself as this is me, I am separate from the world, this woman here is my mother, this woman here is not my family, but she is my teacher, this is our home, oh, this is my bed. There was no concept of her. So without language, there was no experience of herself, there was no experience of her life. Because
Wow.
your life, what is your life? Your life, if you think of your life, you don't think of the smells, the tastes, the feelings. You think of the story about those smells and tastes and feelings. Oh, I'll never forget it. I was in the Disney cruise. We went to this special restaurant. The chef made me something special for as a vegan. It's all contextual. So
Right, right.
why was I saying that about words? I don't, oh yes.
Language.
So as 80% of the information that comes into our brains is all through our eyes, it's still all filtered through language, it's still all filtered through words. That is as far back as I can walk the tangent. I forgot why I was out on that tangent.
Well, we were talking about like waking up and seeing that there is like a clear
Oh,
space and
oh, you so don't have ADHD, do you?
no, I don't.
I don't even know what it's like to not have ADHD. You can probably kind of hear how my brain works as someone with ADHD. Like, there's so much happening in my brain at
Mm-hmm.
once. I can only get so many words out. But that's the thing. So everything is visual, right? All 80% of the information comes in is through our eyes. And I could talk about the cognitive trade-off, the fact that we've learned to rely on language. We actually disregard a lot of information that comes in through our eyes, which is why I think, is it chimps have a photographic memory, you can show them a sequence of dots or numbers for a split second, and they can remember where all of them were, whereas a human can't, because they don't have a spoken language like we do that they've learned to rely on. And so their brains have learned, our brains have just learned to rely less on immediate short-term memory visual
Yep.
indicators, because we're like, I'll listen to this person's words and the tone of voice to get what, if I'm in danger or not. But anyway, looking around the room and seeing all of these things, every one of them is like, I have to fold those and put them back. Oh, that's right. Oh, I have to empty those baskets and make a
Right.
decision about.
Right.
Oh, so when I'm in a cluttered environment, which I still very much am because everything's still in progress, my mind can't rest and just create from nothing, because
Yep.
I never wake up to a clean slate. If I wake
Yes.
up in like a hotel room, I'll wake up like, it's a new day. You know what? I'm going to write my morning pages. I'm going to have a cup of coffee. I'm going to sit by the window while I do it and just look out at and it's like suddenly I'm this whole other person. And
Mm,
so as much as I've been trying to work on myself, I have found I actually have to start with my physical environment that I'm in,
absolutely.
because it's almost like if I was my own goldfish, it's like, yeah, we can talk about your goldfish's health, but unless we talk about the health of the water it's in, like there's no point in giving
Yes.
it a gummy multivitamin.
I think we
So,
totally don't talk enough about our physical surroundings in terms of like our houses and our clutter and like our attachment to things and the connection it
oh
has to
yeah,
our mental health.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think that we have to talk about that more because it's so true. Like if I can tell in the morning the difference between me waking up with no dishes in the sink and
Mm,
waking up with dishes in the sink. Those are two
mhm.
different experiences. It sounds small, but it is like, oh shit, I forgot to do that.
Have you ever heard of Fly Lady?
Mm-mm.
The website is flylady.net, though I'm sure flylady.com exists as well. And Fly stands for finally loving yourself, as in finally loving yourself through action. Like I think of love as a verb. So
Mm-hmm,
it's not
definitely.
about like, do you love me? Like, how do you feel about me? It's about like, what am I doing for myself that demonstrates that love? And she has like this 30 days of baby steps, which are essentially micro habits. So tonight, the only thing you're going to do on day one is make sure that there's no dishes in the sink before you go to bed, and you're going to scrub the sink, and what she calls shining the sink, where you fill it to the absolute brim with a boiling water and 1 cup of bleach. You let that sit for an hour. You drain it. You scrub it with like a scouring cleaner, and then you rinse that, and then you spray it down with like window cleaner, and you buff it dry with newspaper. And she's talking about you get in there with dental floss and go around the corners of like the faucet, and like, or get a toothbrush to go around the little.
Damn.
It sounds crazy. Once you've done it and you look at your sink and it's gleaming, there's this mental lift, and it makes you like,
Mm,
well, I want to keep this way. So then day two,
yes.
you just keep your sink spotless. And like when I shine my sink, I will not only, there's not just dishes in the sink, but I'm like, there's also droplets of water in the sink. Like I need to wipe that, because otherwise that will get dirty. And then like day two, you just keep your sink shining, but then also like pick the clothes that you're going to put on in the morning. And then day
Right.
three, you do those two things again, and you figure out what you're going to eat for dinner.
This
or
is
and or
amazing.
It's really great. With ADHD, for me, I've never been able to follow it, because with ADHD, you can develop tools to cope, but they
Mm-hmm.
only work so long as they are novel. Once the novelty wears
Mm,
off, the tool kind of stops working. It's like, yeah, I was using that thing, but then it kind of like wore off and whatever. So I've never really made it through the whole system. I've never really gave it my all. But yeah, that's why for her, she talks about starting with the kitchen sink. And you're not wrong to talk about that. Like I think we all kind of talk about the kitchen sink and we don't know why, but like it's kind of like the beginning of the health of our environment.
that's so interesting. There's probably some psychology there, right? Like the sink
Sure.
for sure represents something.
Yeah.
I'm positive.
Oh, I'm sure of that.
Okay, I want to go back before I forget.
Yeah.
Where are you on the spectrum of conscious and clueless right now in this moment?
I would say more towards conscious, just because of the nature of the things we're talking about. I have a spiritual mentor. His name is John Oliver. No, not that John Oliver from the Daily Show. This John Oliver was John Oliver before that John Oliver.
Good distinction.
He's John J. Oliver. I don't think he has a middle name, so he just gave himself the letter J as a middle name, kind of like Homer. He once told me, I think this is on the first time we ever met. He said, "You are afraid of the pregnant pause." And immediately I started talking. I'm like, "Oh yeah, well, I think that's just because, like in my family, we all talk a lot and blah, 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 blah." He's like, "You're afraid of the pregnant pause." And I recognize I'm supposed to stop talking for a minute and act like I'm listening. And I'm like, I feel like my skin is on fire. And I'm like, "What is the pregnant pause?" He's like, "It's the moment when something's shared. Like you can keep talking, but it's kind of like, you can keep chewing and putting food in your mouth, but it's not until you stop and swallow that you're like ingesting it and digesting it." So, and yeah, I'm very afraid of the pregnant pause. I'm very afraid for that moment in conversation when there's just that lull.
Mm-hmm.
That's scary. Why is that so uncomfortable? To that, he said to me, he's like, "I want you to try something right now." And he said, "Tell yourself, like out loud, and actually, let's just try this ourselves.
Let's do it."
So, Carly and listener, tell yourself out loud, "I remember that I am sitting."
I remember that I am sitting.
Tell me about that. Tell me about your experience of what just happened when you said that. Did something shift?
I became aware of where my body was hitting the ground, like the awareness of my body and how it's supported by the ground that I'm sitting on.
When you remind your conscious mind, it's something about when you remind your conscious mind of something that you're subconscious of, and you bring them into alignment. I've actually heard that once as the definition of meditation, when you bring the conscious mind and the subconscious into alignment. I have a great book to recommend for you.
Yay.
Have you heard of Florence Scovel Shinn?
No.
We'll get into it.
Okay.
Thank God this is a 7-hour long podcast, right?
Absolutely. We're here all day.
And I know that you do have somewhere to be at a certain moment, but at any rate, that for me was like the first way I had of just stopping myself and reminding myself, like, be conscious, be in this moment. Like that stops me and centers me. I remember that I am sitting, or walking through the city. I remember that I am walking. I remember that I am breathing. I remember that I am talking to Carly right now. Like, this will be a memory one day, but right now it's happening. Have you ever said that to yourself when you're on a vacation?
Yes.
Oh, it's painful.
Yes.
Like, just be in this moment.
Even this morning, I found myself waking up. So I'm visiting my best friend, and I got here on Saturday, and I will be leaving on Saturday. And this morning I was like, "Oh, it's already Tuesday. I'm going to miss him so much." And then I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Do not pull yourself out of this moment.
Yeah.
It's so hard.
You know what you've kind of spoken to, and what I'm about to say is the category of knowledge that this falls into, in case people are wondering, and this doesn't come from me. I'm not just this great thinker. I mean, of course, this field of knowledge has given me access to great thinking.
Right.
Great. As Will Rogers said, "No man's great who thinks he is." Our president might want to take a page from that book right now. But like, for example, psychology is the study of the mind. Oncology is the study of cancer. Biology is the study of the body. Scientology is bullshit. It's not an ology. But ontology.
So glad we got that established.
Oh, isn't that, I don't know who needs to hear it, but
yeah, I was just gonna say somebody needed that.
But ontology, which sounds enough like oncology. Ontology is the study of being. So we take a human being, we understand the human part because we can take a human and cut one apart and examine the human, and we're like, I know exactly how a human works. Do that with being. That doesn't even sound grammatically correct, what I just said.
Right.
How do we be? that doesn't sound grammatically correct, does it? Because it's not, because our language is designed in such a way that it never even gets at the nature of being from a way that that's something that we are doing. Like, it's
Yes.
so outside of our consciousness that we never like our language isn't even designed to give us access to that. Like, how do we be? It sounds like I'm speaking broken English. How do we
Yes.
be? How do we do that? And you kind of think, well, it just happens. It does not just happen.
No.
Like, how does a computer program be? Well, it's given by, and so in the study of ontology, there is all of, and if anyone ever wants to like study this for yourselves, Google Landmark Education or Landmark Worldwide or the Landmark Forum. Look at
You're
their
a
website.
Landmark graduate. That's what it says on your
Yes.
bio, right? I didn't know
Yes.
what that
Yes.
meant.
And it's one of those things that, like, if you Google it and go down the rabbit hole, you're going to think, oh no, it's this weird pyramid thing. People want you to join and they try to get people to join. Legitimately, like, once you've done it, you're like, why wouldn't I want everyone I love to have access to this? Because it's given me access to so much like power and freedom, and it's opened up so much possibility for me. You get nothing. Like, and actually, when I was so skeptical that when I joined, I'm like, hey, I got someone who wants to do it. What do I get? Like, you don't get anything. You get the joy of your friend now has this. Like, what do you get out of telling your friend, oh my God, you have to go see this movie? You don't get anything. All you get is the, oh my God, I know, right? Wasn't that great? And we are so stingy with each other. We're so stingy with each other. We're so stingy with possibility that we can't believe a human being could be motivated by just wanting the other person to have a life that they love, and for no other reason other than they love
Yes.
it. But at any rate, so doing their initial course, which is called the Landmark Forum, that is where I first kind of got access to this. But it reminded me when I was a kid, very DIY. When I was a kid, I was like 6 years old. My dad taught me like one line of computer code in BASIC was the name of the language. I kind of took it from there and like just taught myself the rest. It's like my
Wow.
brother would bring home software from like college or wherever. I would interrupt the program. So like you run the program, you can interrupt it, like kind of like force it to quit. And then while it's running, but you've interrupted it, you can type list and it will list all the code on the screen. Well, it goes by so fast you can't read it. But I found that if you put in this command, you can route it from the screen to the printer. So I would interrupt the program, reroute it to the printer, type list. I'm 6 years old. The printer, old dot matrix connected perforated pages, are printing off like a long banner of code. And I'm like, for D equals 1 to 1000, next D,
I'm
home.
fascinated by this. How is this possible?
Well, also, how is this relevant? And if you're
No,
fascinated
I
by
trust that.
this,
I trust that.
okay, good. You are really trusting. But I'll tell you how it's relevant in a moment. But I would read these lines of code, and then I'd be like, oh, this basically causes, like oh, I don't know about consciously or
Clueless.
confused. I or clueless. I don't know where I am on this part of that spectrum today. But some days words are on my side and I have them. Some days they're not, and it's like weather for me. It's as if it's out of my control. Like, well, the barometric pressure is really high today, so I can't find the right word. And some days I'm like, oh, I can say all the things and I know exactly how to say it. But anyway, effectively in practice, this line of code, what I was looking at, what it did was it caused the computer to pause and then clear the screen. And so I was like, oh, well, that could be useful when I'm doing this. Oh, that could be useful when I'm making a role-playing game and it's putting text on the screen and then it goes to the next paragraph and the next. Then I found the code that you can make graphics. Then I found the code that you can make sounds. And I was like 7 or 8. My brother and I would pull all-nighters and we were making a graphic-based Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure video game on our computer.
Makes
Never
sense.
got past the opening sequence, but we made an opening animated sequence. It was awesome. Anyway, what I did in the Landmark Forum, which is just essentially studying ontology, the science of being.
Yeah.
is, okay, how do we be? Well, how does that computer program be? How does it exist? Well, there's coding. And then you run the scripts, you run the program, you run the language, and it operates accordingly. In the study of being, in an ontological study, I was able to stop the program in my mind that is all the program that is like my software that gives me being. And I was able to actually recognize that there is such a program, that that's not just me being, there's a program
Yes.
running.
Yes.
Okay, well, let's look at the language that is giving me that program. And then I can actually look at, oh my God, this is what gives me being. For example, I am anxious. Wait, well, why am I anxious? Oh, I am anxious because as I'm listening to this person, I am fearing, oh my God, I'm wrong. Oh my God, I'm bad. Oh my God, they don't like me. Oh my God, I don't like the way that they're looking at me. Normally, you would just think, oh, well, that person gave me a dirty look and they think less of me. You don't know that they
Mm.
think that. There is a filter in your brain constantly filtering everything through a binary, whether it's right or wrong, good or bad. I trust this or I don't trust this. I like this or I don't like this. Um, someone's trying to dominate me. I want to
Right.
avoid dominating them, or avoid being dominated, or I want to either wanting to dominate or avoid being dominated.
Right.
There are all these dualities, like all these light switch flips going back and forth. And if you think about binary, like a whole computer program is just a one, a zero, a one, a zero. So it's just, in what order are my light switches flipped right now? That is how I'm
Yes.
going to experience everything that's coming in. If you don't know that that's there, you just think, well, I'm just being me. I'm just listening to this woman and she's just, and I don't like her attitude. She doesn't
Right.
have an attitude. Your program is perceiving an attitude based on the conversation that's happening in your head that you don't realize is happening. And once you actually learn how to see that, it never stops.
Mm-hmm.
But you can recognize that, oh, that's the program that is running by default. Over time, with practice, you can learn to to upgrade that program, but you
Yep.
will always have to recognize that it is there. And now, if I recognize that's there, I can, like, for example, there was a moment with my dad where he said something that I thought was so problematic and hurtful and whatever, I couldn't even believe what he was saying. And I decided, all right, well, we're heading, I'm sure in Minnesota, you also say up north. We're going up
Mm-hmm.
north. We were
Mm-hmm.
heading
Mm-hmm.
up north to our lake house, which is in like the north woods of Wisconsin. 4 hour car drive. An hour into the drive, we have this argument. I blow up at him. And I decided, okay, well, silent treatment. I'm just not talking to you anymore. So for 3 hours of a car trip, just silence. I even got a
Oof.
phone call from someone in recovery who wanted me to sponsor them, and I had to field that entire conversation, like, and then return to just not talking. Like, I had that in front of my dad, and then just went back to not talking. Despite what my dad said, I recognized that my dad started what he said by saying, you know, Ben, I know that you're probably not going to want to hear this, but what I believe is, and then he said what he believed. And
Mm.
I recognized that what I did in that conversation was I made it clear to him that it is not, you're not free to say whatever you think around me. If you say the wrong thing, I am going to absolutely kill you off and make you feel as bad as I possibly have the power to do so. So I recognized in that moment, I owe my dad an apology.
Yeah.
Immediately, what came out from me was, I can't apologize to him. Do you know what he said? He is so in the wrong. I can't apologize. And in that moment, I was able to see, okay, well, what matters to me is my relationship with my dad. Giving them silent treatment does not further that intention of us being close and connected. That's what I want to create with my dad, being close and connected. That does not create that. It actually does the opposite. Okay, so what's an action I would take right now that would further that intention with my dad? And I'm like, ugh, apologize. And then I was like, wait, why? Ugh, where in me
Yeah.
is that
Totally.
negative response to that? And I saw it. That duality that we all have, ultimately, all of that, this is right, this is wrong, that's good, it's bad, I trust this, I trust this, I like her, I don't like her. Ultimately, all of that is designed for one greater purpose, for one great binary, one great on or off switch. And if you can't remember all of those others that are there, remember this one: looking good or avoiding looking bad. That's it. Everything in your life that you say, that you do, or that you don't say or don't
Yes.
do
Yes.
is ultimately governed by your need to look good or your need to avoid looking bad. However many million years of evolution or thousands of years of evolution, that's still there. We're still a pack animal, and we won't survive left alone if the pack rejects us. So we're always going to be watching for, like, okay, am I separate from are they looking at me bad, or like, do I look bad to people, do I look good to people? It's just always there, and it has no way to manifest itself, because we're not actually in the forest being chased by a bear. I don't actually need my pack. If the pandemic has proved anything to me, I can quite happily live alone in this apartment for 6 months. But or God, 7 anyway. But it has nowhere to play out. So it plays out everywhere in our day to day. And I recognized in this moment the reason, and you can finish the sentence for me. The reason I can't apologize to my dad is because if I apologize to my dad, I will what?
You'll look bad?
I'll look bad. And then I thought, okay, what matters to me? My relationship with my dad or looking bad in front of my dad? And I thought, my dad has seen me in much more embarrassing situations. I can certainly apologize to him. I can look bad or risk looking bad if it will help my relationship with my dad. So I went and I apologized. I'm like, hey, I apologize for the way I treated you. I made it so clear that it's not safe to share with me, and I'm not giving you space to be yourself. And thank you for never treating me that way, because if you treated me that way, I'd be crushed. I would never forget it. And he was so forgiving. And so a lot of things I don't know how to be. And I'm kind of having a fight right now with my mom, and I'm going to go to my dad for help with it, because I want to, rather than waiting for it to get to my dad, which I'm sure I know it's already gotten back to him, and I know that he's going to write me an email or give me an ultimatum or whatever. I just want to go to him like, Dad, I need your help. I'm trying to talk to Mom. Here's how it went. Like, can you help me with this? Because they talk about racism, and ultimately, I hate this, but you have to meet people where they're at. And with issues of social justice, like, I'm having a conversation with my mother, expecting that she knows the name Breonna Taylor, expecting she knows the name Emmett Till, expecting that she understands what redlining was, that she understands Black Wall Street, that she understands every time they have anything of their own, we burn it down, we steal it, we condemn it. Before I lived on my own, because I won the affordable housing lottery, which people always say, what is that? I'm like, well, it's like a lottery for housing that's affordable. I don't know how else to explain it. But before that, I lived with my best friend, who, as people might know, if you watch RuPaul's Drag Race, my best friend is my drag mother. And her name is Bob the Drag Queen. She won season 8 of RuPaul's Drag Race. Spoiler alert. Well, when we lived together for 4 years, she was and still is Black. So that for me was such an eye-opener, because I realized in the moment, I'm like, I have Blackness in my home every day, and it forces me to confront things I've never had to live with. Like, this is so stupid, but like, I picked up one of his makeup sponges one day, and I'm like, what happened to his makeup sponge? Because mine, when I use makeup sponges, everything kind of looks this orangey coral color, but his were like brownish black. And I'm like, what happened? Oh, that's the color of his foundation. I mean, the things that were new to my mind, it's embarrassing for me to admit that. It was embarrassing for me to think of things I asked him, things I had to ask, things I had to be stopped and told about.
Yes.
And I have to realize my mom has never had that experience. And now that they're retiring, basically, they come down to Milwaukee for like a couple days a week. Then they go back up to the North Woods of Wisconsin.
And that's it.
She does not have Blackness in her day-to-day life. She doesn't have that in her experience. She cannot turn on the news and understand that, like, I mean, the one of the biggest eye openers, if someone could just trust me and I could tell them one thing, I would just tell them, listen to and trust Black people and their experiences when they tell you their experiences, because that's the thing we've never done. And it's the thing that if we could just listen and not have that conversation running in our head that says, that's wrong, I don't trust that, I don't believe that, that can't be true. Well, if that's true, then that's saying that I'm a bad person. Because the whole conversation with my mom was like, how could you say that about your cousin? She's a wonderful person. She's a nurse, and she gives she would give the shirt off her back and blah blah. And I'm like, yes, and she's saying racist things.
Yep.
And I'm like, if you say, well, if people don't want to be shot by the police and they just shouldn't break the law, and my mom's like, well, I shared that too on Facebook. I'm like, and that's racist. And the problem with talking to my mom is she's so wrapped up in this conversation that to her, the way that conversation runs is it centers everything around, am I a good person? And so in questioning
Yes.
racism, she's making it about, am I a good person? Now, I cannot tell my mom, like, you're centering yourself in this conversation. This isn't about, she's not there. She can't hear
Yep.
that.
Yep.
All she's hearing is, oh, I'm an even worse person right now. Why does my son think I'm a bad person? I keep telling him I love him. And I'm telling her, you can keep telling me that you love me all you want. That doesn't mean anything. And I will argue you don't love me, because when your action is you vote against my human rights every time you have the choice to, and you do that, I'm going to tell you you don't love me. And if you think you love me, your love is meaningless to me. And well, I'm sorry, not meaningless, worthless to me.
Yeah.
I can say that to you because you're not my mom on the phone with me right now. But like even that's what I want to express to her. That's not how she's going to get that. I
Yeah.
have to recognize she's in pre-kindergarten in terms of this conversation. If I'm going to go there with her, I have to be willing to be that patient. I have to be willing to do that much heavy lifting. I have to be willing to put in that much time. Think about how much time it took for me to get where I am today. And I had to kind of get there from just kind of figuring it out myself. No one sat me down and told me.
Right.
If my mom would let me sit her down and tell her, I could hopefully get her there faster. But she would have to trust me.
Right.
And when she can't trust me, she's like, one of the disagreements was, well, cops aren't just out here killing Black people for no reason. I'm like, they literally are, though. She's like, no, they're not. And I'm like, if you can't trust that my life experiences have shown me things that your life experiences haven't,
Yeah.
if you can't trust that, then nothing I say is going to matter. So I also can't go into certain things I want to go into. And and you can hear it from talking to me, the way my mind works is like, I have 30 points that I'm going to make at once. And I need you to hold, like, for every point that you make, I have 30 I need to make. So yes, you've had your turn to say your one thing. Now is my turn to say my 30 things.
Right. Actually, this is a good tie-in, I think, to veganism in my own experience, or just anything where you like learn and your awareness is opened up. And I wasn't born vegan, right? Like, not many people are. It's happening more and more, but I had to get there, right? On this journey of
Actually, you
like,
had to get back
I
to
had to get
veganism because
back.
we were born
Yes.
vegan.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
we were immediately but go on.
Yes. I love that. So I had to get back. And I have found myself, and recently thinking about it more and more, and I'm not trying to equate veganism with Blackness, but I just mean in terms of like learning things that we didn't know before.
Right.
All of a sudden, in my immediate, I went vegan, I was so confused by why everybody in my life was not instantly listening to me and also being vegan.
Oh my God.
I just was like, no, guys, I understand what I'm talking about. Why are you not like clicking in here? Why don't you trust me? And that is not how it works, because that is not how it worked for me.
Right.
So why
Right.
am I suddenly thinking that it's going to work for all the people in my life? It doesn't make
Well,
sense.
and there is that, well, why aren't they trusting me? Why aren't they listening to me? That's also, I could go into a whole conversation here about woke culture and cancel culture and quote unquote being too PC. I don't believe there's any such thing as being too PC. How can you be too correct? You can't. What you
Agreed.
can do is weaponize PC culture against anyway. So in that way that I've just hinted at, people will say like, well, you're centering yourself. Don't talk to people that way. And I will, and after this podcast, I'm going to go on continuing to talk to people that way on the internet because I am a dick on the internet. And I finally, if you know Christopher Sebastian, VGN News, I
Mm.
love that on his Patreon, he's like, I'm creating like education and pettiness. And I'm like, thank you for just acknowledging that what we do is we revel a little bit in being petty. And I'm like, as a drag queen, I think I'm going to allow myself that because I so look up to and appreciate Colleen Patrick Goudreau that I forget that that doesn't mean I have to be her because my mind
Mm.
is always looking for, okay, well, who is right? And if I have to pick someone, I'd say, well, she's the one who's right. Like you can't be
Yeah.
righter
Yeah.
than
Yeah. Yeah.
Colleen Patrick Goudreau. That does not mean that I have to be her and I have to take her approach. Some people, after hearing her, are going to need the drag queen who's going to let them decompress and whatever and blah blah blah. Um, and but at any rate, there is that centering of ourselves when we hear that and we think, oh, why can't they trust me, or why don't they? If they trusted me, they'd be vegan. If they loved me, they'd be vegan. It's just not about us. And it's
Yes.
not, and in that moment that, I think the first time I ever even heard the word vegan, it's because like some angry gluten-free lesbian from Brooklyn was asking
Mm-hmm.
at some indie coffee shop like about of
The scene you've
stone.
painted is just like so so good.
And to everyone in any of those communities, like, you're welcome for me using your identity to paint a caricature. But I did, like, I don't remember any of this. You know how like you're like, I don't remember any of it. I remember 5% of it, but here's
Yeah.
how it happened in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I just remember like, well, are they vegan? About some like muffin or
Okay.
something
All
at
right.
a coffee shop. And it wasn't asked in a way of like, oh, wonderful. And can I ask, is it a vegan muffin? Oh, well, what I mean by that is, does it contain any animal ingredients like dairy or egg or butter? If I had heard it expressed with a loving intention, and I don't mean so much an intention, I'm trying to find, there is a dance I'm doing between finding in conversations, is there good faith in this conversation? Am I
Mm.
dealing with someone who has good faith in me
Mm.
and in this conversation? And isn't it so easy to, if you can distinguish that light switch is there,
Right.
then you can suddenly ask yourself in a conversation like, oh, that's what feels yucky and
Yeah.
stifling and entrapping about this conversation, is this person doesn't have good faith. If
Yeah.
I suddenly say the right thing, I don't think that they're going to say, yes, bingo, that's it. Now what do you see? Now that's, they're going to be like, yeah, and that's why, blah, blah, like, okay, there's not good faith. And I don't feel that the intention behind it is to educate me. The intention is to shame me, which is another form of educating, but it's like, I'm going to educate by like making you feel bad rather than like, I'm going to educate like lovingly. So because of that, that was my first association of veganism. Now, is this anything to do with, well, if I trusted her, or,
Right.
well, if I knew her? It's just that I wasn't oh my God, I'm working this out in my head for the first time. Like, I wasn't sensing, I wanted to say I wasn't sensing love and positivity, but I guess human beings are motivated by possibility. Like, everything is about,
Mm.
do I see a possibility for myself in
Yes.
this? And there's a term that I learned in doing the Landmark Forum. This is an ontological term. There's a lot of terms that they use that are just, they're plain English, but they're not the way that we would use them in everyday speech. But they use the term enroll. Now, when we
Mm.
think of enroll, we think of signing up for something.
Yeah.
Think of that in a different way. To enroll someone is to create a possibility to be present for them such that they are moved, touched, and inspired by that possibility. So,
Woo.
you see what I mean? Like, even that even that, are you enrolled in that? Like, yes, I am I now see a possibility I didn't see before you just said that. And I am
Yes.
moved, touched, and or inspired. Moved as in, I no longer stand over here. I now stand with the animals. I have a different stance. Or touched as in, you have touched my humanity. Or inspired by like ideas. Has
Yes.
that happened as a result of that? So that's enrolling someone. Everyone is motivated by enrollment. Either I'm enrolled in what you're saying or what you're creating, or I am not enrolled in it. And if I'm not enrolled in what you're doing or being or creating or saying, I'm not going to take any action on it. Taking an action is registration. There's I'm enrolled and there's I am registered. Like oh my god, I'm enrolled in you talking about veganism is like, oh my god, I see. Like, I've never even considered the animals feelings for their children. I'm registered is I am now vegan. Today's day one of vegan. Okay, let me look over this menu. Help me with this menu because I don't know what to order. So what do I how do I get this then? That is I'm enrolled and I'm registered.
So how did you become registered? How did you become vegan?
Well, my spiritual mentor, John Oliver, every
Yep.
time we meet, there is some lesson. You know, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Oh my God, I'm fine. I'm just thinking I should force that one on my mom. I'm like, this conversation wouldn't be here
Ooh.
unless you were ready for the lesson. Don't talk to people like that, Ben.
Yes. Maybe
But
reframe a little bit, but
yeah,
the sentiment is right.
yeah. But he taught me about fasting. I had done the master cleanse, which if you aren't familiar with it by that definition, people also call it like the lemonade diet, the
Oh,
Beyonce diet, the whatever. It's, cayenne pepper, lemon juice, and
yep.
maple syrup, and that's all you eat. And I love not, it doesn't work for everyone. I love it. I could just be on the master cleanse for 3 months and I'd be like, oh, I think I don't have to think about food. I don't have to stop. And
Oh,
like 1
interesting.
week, I got to juice some lemons. That's it. Well, after doing that, I noticed that I was like in pain when I went back to eating. Now, it's probably because I didn't ease my way in. I
Right,
just
right, right, right.
went for it and ate big full meals. And he's like, if you switched to a raw vegan diet for like 90 days after that, you would. And I'm like, that's not the way to talk to me. Forget raw. And even as a vegan, I'm like, don't talk to me about 90 days of being raw. I'm just not here for it.
From being from Minnesota and Wisconsin too, when it's like cold in winter, I'm like, don't talk to me about raw food. Give me some soup.
And I know, shout out to TJ Long. I know a
Yes.
raw
Yep.
vegan. Yes, you know
He just
TJ.
he just moved to Cook County and he's a fourth grade teacher in Grand Marais.
So so when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Vegan, yes.
And he mentioned veganism, and here was where I was like, okay, this student is not ready anymore. I will
Mm-hmm.
never be ready anymore. We're done. We've reached an impasse. I can't do vegan. I thought back to that angry lesbian hippie gluten-free Brooklyn girl with whatever, not girl, young lady. I'm trying to, like, young woman. I'm trying to stop saying girl. I'm like, okay, is she 18 or older, or like arguably like 15 or 16 or 17? Like, how
It's hard.
do you decide when someone's a woman? But we would never say like, oh yeah, you want to open a bank account? Great. Talk to the boy behind the counter. You would be like, boy, that's just gross. I'm uncomfortable that you
Isn't
said
it?
that. But like, talk to the girl
Mm-hmm.
behind the counter. It's our experience of ourselves, our experience of life only exists in language. How we language ourselves, how we language each other, how we language our life shapes what we see, shapes what we see, what we think that we're dealing with, shapes how we experience one another. You keep calling women girls, we're going to keep seeing them not as adults, not
Yes,
as, do you
yes,
know what I mean?
yes.
And not all women
Do.
agree with me on that. They're like, listen, I'm 60. Please call me a girl, huh? I'm like, oh, yeah, fine. But, um, it's like how you want to transform your world, transform your word. Language does
Mm.
not only, we think
Woo.
language describes. If I said to you, language has one job, language describes things, wouldn't you kind of conclude after thinking about it, you're like, well, yeah, that's kind of all language does, right? It just describes things. Well, what did we call it in 1776, colonization and blah blah blah, and screw America? But
Mm-hmm.
what did we call when we wanted to have independence? What document did we write? The blank of independence. What was it called?
The Declaration of Independence.
Why was it not called the description of independence or the definition of independence? Well, because there was no independence we couldn't describe our independence. We didn't have it.
Right.
So what did we do? We declared it. To declare is to create something with speech. For example, I now declare you legally wed. You can talk about it, you can plan the wedding, you can throw the wedding, you can be there walking down the aisle in the dress. You're not married until the officiant says, I now declare you husband and wife.
Yes.
That's the moment that, where's the moment a girl becomes a woman? I don't know. I can tell you the moment a bride becomes a wife. It's the minute she's declared wed by the officiant. So language does not just describe our world, it also creates our world. I have to realize, and here's what I need to tell myself before calling my mom on Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
The more I say my mom is, this, I don't want to use the adjectives. The more I say my mom is this and she's a that and she's a that, well, then the more it's true.
Yeah, you manifest it.
I'm manifesting that, and I will continue to find evidence to support. The more I say that, the more I've created that, the more I will see it, because it's literally what I'm creating. And the more evidence I will have to support that I'm right. If I changed my word and I started saying, my mom is patient and loving and understanding and like generous with her listening. If I just described her that way and just think of her that way and just relate to her that way on the phone call, I'm going to move mountains rather than, and I have to remember that on Thursday when we talk again.
So much of what you are describing, because I've been getting into more and more this idea of manifesting, and I love it. Like it feels like it's helped me to like move through things. It's helped me to create things. It helps me feel like I'm in control of things, but also to like trust I don't know. I just have been feeling like it's a really good place for me. And a lot of the conversations we've had feel like they teeter into that land of manifestation in that conversation.
Because I'm not going to go into this whole tangent and have time for it. Mm-hmm. There's a book that you need to read. Now, there's the name of the book, and then there's the name of the book. There's the name of the book, and then there's the name of the book that the book is in.
Okay.
There's a book called The Wisdom of Florence Scovel Shinn, and it is a collection of 4 of her books.
Okay.
I've never even finished reading the first one because ADD.
Yep.
But the first one is called The Game of Life and How to Play It. You can actually find this book online. Like I think it's in the public domain now. When I read this, I thought, wow, this is some new agey. Like, has she been on Oprah? This woman died like in like the 30s or 40s. I think.
Oh, damn.
Like this is an old book. It was written in like 1920s.
Okay. And
it's what we would today lump in with and call metaphysics, but I don't do that with this book, because to call it metaphysics is to it into this category of I already know this. It's just like this. And that's a thing, that's a linguistic trap our brains use in how they operate. It's easier to learn things. So it's like, oh yeah, that's just like this. Oh yeah, that's just like this other thing that I know. And we can fit things into what we already know, and it's easier to learn and memorize them. But that's also an obstacle, because it's like, oh, you're just like my ex-boyfriend. Well, I'm making you like him because my mind is doing that, because you're always looking for, this is similar to that. When you stop doing that, you're like, oh, this is its own thing. Then you really get the power of it. You really get the experience of it. But her book, The Game of Life and How to Play It, it's a must read. When I first moved to New York, I dated a guy. His mother was actress Jean Vanderpyle, the original and only voice of Wilma Flintstone.
Oh, wow.
So I dated Wilma Flintstone's son.
Totally.
And she gave him this book, and it was a very important book to him. And he gave me this book, and I've given this book as gifts. For those with ADHD, you can actually read the book on YouTube. Like there's someone who will like read it and put like a paragraph at a time on the screen with some colorful background. But the game of life and how to play it basically talks about like how you create the world with your word. If you want to manifest things, you need to understand there's your conscious mind, your subconscious mind, and your superconscious mind. Now, in a moment, I'm going to come back to how I became vegan. Because I have to finish that story. I'm doing with my hands what I call bookmarks. So I'm like, bookmark, okay, bookmark that. So this bookmark is
I
how I
do that
became vegan.
too.
Yes.
I
Okay,
do that
great.
too. I was just
Now,
looking at the time. I was like, I literally feel like we could do a part 2.
I'd be up for it. I'd be very up for it, because I also realized I never told the listeners like who I am or what I'm about. But I'll mention that. That's the next
I was
bookmark.
just thinking that too. Like, there's so much I want to get into. I am
Yeah.
adoring talking to you. Like,
Oh, thank you.
I always say, and not that it's not truthful, but I always say like, oh, I could talk to these people forever because I love doing this. But I'm literally like, I just want to talk about this shit with you all day.
And I'm really enjoying and getting value out of this conversation personally. Like, there is something about the way that the inquiry that you are. I say that you are as a fact of your being, right? Rather than the inquiry that you're in, like it's a thing that you're experiencing. No, you are being an inquiry. The inquiry that you are is a very inviting space for me to like come into and play and wonder and speculate, because my inquiry, like our inquiries are sort of like aligned, and it's kind of, I love collaboration, because if you've ever played Mario 64, there's this scene
Yes.
where the only way to get up this wall is there's 2 narrow walls and you can wall jump back and forth between them. Well, try doing that when there's one wall. I mean, good luck getting up the wall. Maybe you can do it.
What an
Like
image.
in Bonk's Adventure, which is made for the TurboGrafx, you can get up a wall by chewing. Like, he's like a caveman and he uses his huge head, but he'll bite into a wall and then chew his way up the wall. Well, it's not as easy as just wall jump back and forth.
Yeah.
Ms. Cracker, my other drag sister, she was on season 10 of Drag Race. And then recently she was on All Star season 5. She helped me create a number of mine that she was helping me with, and she was performing in the number with me. I came up with the idea mostly by myself, but the minute she came over and I'm talking it out with her, she's like, oh yeah, and then you could, oh, and then what about, oh, and what about, the number was done in 10 minutes. Whereas on my own, it could have taken a month, like things that would take me 2 months when I'm collaborating. It'll happen in 10 minutes. So that's what I love about these conversations together. So I'll quickly get back to Florence Scovel Shinn. If you've seen the movie Charlie's Angels, there's a scene where they have to make a key, and they take this thing that's like a clamshell, but it's filled with clay, and they put the key in it and they press it, and it pushes the key down into the clay and makes an impression of the key. In my mind, the key or that level is the conscious mind. It's the thing that you're pointing your mind at right now. Your subconscious is the clay. It's the thing it's the thing you impress. You impress your subconscious mind with your conscious mind. So what are you conscious of? What are you speaking, whether it's out loud or in your actions or in your being or in your relationships? What are you creating with your word? Who are you being? That is how you impress your subconscious mind. So for example, if I'm like eating right and buying my own food, but the whole time I'm kind of thinking about how I never stick with anything, and I'm just fat. I'm going to impress the subconscious mind with the idea that this is how it's going to work out in the end. The subconscious mind, it's how does she say it? And I'm going to get this wrong in a way. But the subconscious mind just takes things literally. It works them out as if they're marching orders. It doesn't question what we're feeding it. Like, oh, well, you didn't mean that. It has no sense of humor. It has no sense of irony. It's like a computer program that, like, if you typed into the computer program, okay, blow up world, send, haha, the computer program's not gonna be like, you don't mean that. It's gonna be like, blow okay, up world. That's what it does. So that's how the subconscious works. And then the superconscious mind, I kind of forget how to explain that one. So I'll just say, if you're interested, the superconscious mind is like the God conscious mind. It's kind of like how we then let it come back down, like getting it down on the page, letting it speak
that
to
like
us,
connection to source kind of thing.
Yeah. So the game of life and how to play it will kind of better describe that. I can wrap up the John Oliver story and how I became vegan, and I'm happy to do a part 2 and talk more about it. With John Oliver, as soon as he said vegan, I remembered thinking, oh, I could never go vegan. I heard myself say I could never, and I got defensive. I'm like, what is it I could never do? Like, well, says who? Oh, says me. What do I know? Don't tell me what I can't do. And he gave me this book called The Face on Your Plate by, I don't know how to pronounce it, Jeffrey Moussaieff Masson. Mamasa, whatever.
Yep.
You'll find it if you Google it. It's not a gross or graphic or scary book. It's just so terribly sad. And it reconnected me with who I was eating. And okay, chickens, you're eating chickens. In nature, here's what a chicken would do if they had the day off and they were free. Well, they would probably dust bathe because it's how they get the oil out of their feathers. They sunbathe, they'll stretch one arm at a time, one wing at a time, and they'll soak up the sun. They like music. Here's how they are with their. Once I realized the idea that a chicken in a cage does not have enough space to like turn around or like spread their arms, I imagined, if you've ever had someone jokingly pin your elbows down at your side and you want to move your arms but you can't, or you're in a crowd or you're in a whatever,
that
you
just made my
can't.
whole body like,
right? For a second, imagine that's your whole life. I didn't, even saying, oh, I can't even imagine, I don't even want to think about it, is the privilege I have as a human in opting out of that reality. Like, oh, I opt out of that reality. I do not want to even think about it. That chicken, that pig, they have to live it every minute of every day. And when I realized to whom I was doing that, pinning their arms down at their side, I just realized like but that's not me. Who I have known myself my whole life, taking that action, causing that, does not further my intention of being the person I say I get to be. It's inconsistent. So if the action I need to take to be who I think I am is to stop it, I can stop that. I went vegetarian for 6 months. And then went vegan. Like, that's its own whole story if I tell that.
yes, we will get
So
into it in
I think I
part
have
2.
a minute left. I'm just going to quickly say, so hi, let me introduce myself. So Ben Strothmann here, host of Big Fat Vegan Radio. I am known as Honey LaBronx, the vegan drag queen. So you can check me out at vegandragqueen.com. At the moment we're recording this, my podcast, my website is down for whatever reason, Vegan Drag Queen. But I'm known as the Vegan Drag Queen. So I have a cooking show on YouTube. I also am known for, I travel the world doing my one-woman drag show as a fundraiser for local LGBTQ organizations and animal rights organizations. And now, given the political climate, I want to open that up a bit and start doing it for, like, Black organizations, women's organizations. I am a stand for peace in the Middle East, and I make no apologies for. I am proudly pro-Palestinian human rights and dignity. So doing fundraisers for organizations that help them as well. So to date, I have done 111 fundraiser shows. In 73 cities in 5 countries, benefiting 148 organizations. I love statistics so much, I became one. And I love spreadsheets. Anyone can call me at any hour, be like, can I talk to you about spreadsheets for a minute? I'd be like, that's like porn to my ears. But I have raised to date, and of course, all of this stopped in 2020, but I've raised $41,041, just over $44,000 for charity, which pales in comparison to what a lot of people have done. But hey, it's what I've done.
Thank you for that work.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And hey, nothing in life is completely selfless.
Right.
I have created an opportunity for me to travel the world doing what I love and getting better at doing what I love by doing it all the time, and in a way that puts money in my pocket and raises money to create the difference I want to make in the world. So, but, and I also do speeches and MC veg fests and things like that. So you'll see me a little bit sometimes on the vegan event circuit. And yeah, and I could say so much more about that. But I'll end just by saying I'm a huge fan of Björk. I speak Icelandic, and I have like 60 or more essential oils.
That's a beautiful way
And
to
no,
end.
not Young Living or any of that multi-level marketing. I just buy original, like, just I want basil oil. Okay, great. I want hyssop oil. I just buy them individually. I don't buy like blends and stuff. I make my own.
DIY,
Yep.
even with oils.
There was something that this whole thing was going to bring full circle, and I don't know if I did it, but it was something about the consciousness and recognizing that, like, being conscious in this moment, and like, I don't know, I'm just going to assume that it all completes not with whatever the next thing is that I say. It all completes in the listener's mind. I will let their minds finish my thoughts for me.
Perfect. Thanks for listening to another episode of Consciously Clueless. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Honey LaBronx as much as I did, and I cannot wait to share with you part 2 of our conversation. If you are enjoying this podcast, hit subscribe wherever you're listening. And if you want to help me get this into the ears of more listeners, send it to a friend, text it to a family member, share on social media. Whatever you can do, I greatly appreciate. And if you want to be mentioned on air and read as a review of the week, head over to Apple Podcasts, leave a review, and you might hear it in next week's Sunday solo episode. Until next time.